So we just thought these are not real communities, and if they were led as real communities, they would have created a wonderful, bunch of value to members, to people who are in it, and of course also to organizations who'd like to, deploy talent communities for real. Community as a structure is a structure of safety, is a structure of sincerity. People join communities, because they believe that they're going to be seeing this, they're going to be coming into a big place, let's say, that we as community professionals have designed for them.
Hello and welcome to the Digital Community Leaders Podcast, a conversation with community experts diving into their insights and leading you with actionable ideas. Today we're joined by Ilker. Ilker is a community strategist with experience working with big tech. He's focused on creating talent communities and how they can have a real impact on your talent acquisition. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. This is the Digital Community Leaders Survey 2023. And this is the Digital Community Leaders Survey 2023 second edition. Back in 2023, we released a beautiful printed book. And due to its popularity, we sold out of printed copies. Rather than reprinting, we listened to your feedback and we included 40% more content in this copy. We created the report to be a data-backed handbook for building the foundations of your brand's community. For instance, did you know that 70% of communities we surveyed saw growth over the last 12 months? And we know those businesses are growing too. Other metrics we dive into include community growth, biggest pain points, community purpose, what are other community managers measuring, funding, participation, C-suite involvement, and much, much, much more. In this book, we present the data and expert insights from Richard Gott, Michelle Goodall, Vincent Boone, Keen Bakatari, Rosie Sherry, Matt Sullivan, Laura Roth, Nicole Saunders, Blaise Grimes-Vort, and Jan Carlisle. We've also included frameworks such as the community archetypes, ecosystem of impact, community participation ladder, and the community first culture nexus. There's so much in here, I can't wait for you to get your hands on this new edition. You can order your printed copy from Amazon today or download a digital copy for free at digitalcommunityleaders.com. Ilker, it's great to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really, really well. And how are you, Pete?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm excited to jump into our conversation. And we've met a few times at a few various events, co-working days, conferences, etc. But it's good to have some one-on-one time to really chat to you about what you're up to and how things are going. So you said your day is going well. Did you have a good summer? Did you manage to get out, travel much, or were you mostly just at home?
Well, I actually was able to do a little bit of traveling. So there was one of the things that I always wanted to do was to visit the Normandy and the Loire Valley in France. And this year I had the opportunity to do that. So on that regard, it's been a good summer. And of course, it's been a busy summer as well, not only work-wise, but also personal life-wise, because I've recently relocated to Cambridge in the UK, and I've just completed a house move, which is exciting and stressful. So lots of things, lots of hoops to go through, so to speak. So it's been a good summer because there's been some accomplishments, and of course they've all been they have their own difficulties. But there we are. These are not really problems; they're just things to be grateful about.
Oh, well, congrats on the move, and it's good to have you settled and whatnot. And one of the things you're doing in Cambridge is talent. You lead TalentLed. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes. So TalentLed is one of the few things that I'm actually doing. So to introduce, I am a community strategy consultant. Dealing with communities, I guess, is no surprise to anyone listening to this at the moment, I guess. So I've been doing, I've been leading communities, strategizing in communities for a good few years now. And I did focus previously on developer communities, some brand communities work, non-profits as well. And recently, a few years ago, if you like, me and my wonderful partner Todd Nilsson, who's based in the US, we started chatting and talking about talent communities because we kept on, hearing about this word, and we, just like many other things around, found out that it was sort of misused. It's been used for something else, for sort of pools or for some sort of virtual repositories of CVs, resumes, and sorts. So we just thought these are not real communities, and if they were led as real communities, they would have created a wonderful, bunch of value to members, to people who are in it, and of course also to organizations who'd like to, deploy talent communities for real. So that's why we started TalentLed. So it started as a consultancy to help organizations put together talent communities, real ones, not just for candidates, but also for employees, and most importantly, the hidden gem, alumni. So now we are in an exciting stage because we're now turning into a product. So the wonderful Rachel has actually joined us as Chief Product Officer, and we're trying to turn this into a wonderful startup where we're able to provide products regarding forming, keeping, growing talent communities. So this is what we are.
Nice. I've been chatting to quite a few various alumni managers recently, and it's really interesting talking about to them about the value which their education, university or college or whatever it is, places on alumni. Some are very much like alumni are the lifeblood. It's so important to have them engaged, and it's really important for fundraising and signing up new folk. And some folk, for some universities, it's kind of just a thing that trickles on. And it's really interesting seeing how it seems to be depending on leadership, depending on the priority put on alumni programs.
Definitely. I mean, when I say alumni, yes, it's, the alumni normally refers to the people who graduated from an education institution, and those are very, very important people. I did a recent project about that here in Cambridge, and definitely it is something that can actually create a massive value, not only for the alumni so that they can actually contribute to their previous education institution, but also for the institution itself, because of course there's a lot of fundraising, there's a lot of possibilities of giving back. When we say alumni, we just try and also use that word for people who've actually been through an organization as a worker. So it's also, it is the forgotten thing in the sense that it is part of your talent journey. You become interested in an organization, you become a candidate, you go through the interviews, you get a job, and then you become an employee. And when you become an employee, of course, you go through the motions of, being an employee, and you leave the organization. Many times these years, unfortunately, not, through your own decision, but there are also times where you decide that, something else is more, is better for you. And in any case, you become an alumnus, and you become someone who's actually been in this organization, like ex-worker, so to speak. So this, we believe, is an extremely important thing because you can see that pretty much in any organization, there are some loose or tight-knit communities that form around ex-workers of XYZ. And we believe that, treating these as a formal community that is connected to the organization is a very, very important thing. So these people can actually refer new, candidates. They can actually talk about the organizational benefits. They can be a wonderful advocate for the organization if they've had a good experience, if they felt supported and they wanted to, they moved on because they wanted to do something else. Most of the time, we're talking about becoming a founder as such. So there are a number of, the benefits. So we believe that, treating these as a community, as a community with a right strategy, is extremely important for the organization. Beyond having them as an employee.
Definitely, we're fortunate that we've got a few folk who have who spent a few years with us and then moved on to different kind of pastures. And when we put out a job ad, they often share it on their LinkedIn and explain their experience of working at Steadfast. And it's always really nice that even though we no longer pay them, they're no longer on payroll, they still feel like they can advocate for us. And it's always it's always lovely when you kind of see that happen in the real world. And just because somebody's left you, whether, you know, you're a company of our size, quite small, or much larger, like an Apple or an IBM or whatever, that network's still really important. And it's nice when people leave on good terms rather than just sour feeling terms. So yeah, no, it's good. It's nice.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I mean, this day and age, I mean, I'm not just talking about this because we focus on it as an organization, but these have become facts of professional life. So in the old times, you used to be an employee, somebody with a wage, and then basically you would move on to another company or something else. But these days, there are many, many ways of being connected with the company. So a lot of, especially technology companies, when people leave, they end up, being connected to the organization anyway, as a supplier, as a contractor, as a partner. They start something, and naturally, the first client that they want to, bring on is their employer, because they know how things work, they know what's missing. So there's every opportunity to bring in, a set of services that they can actually provide independently. So these are important things. And of course, now a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, they have all these sort of armies of freelancers or these contractors that they employ. So keeping them as a community that is connected to you, and being able to connect with them and let them know where your company is going and what the company is about to do, is a great way of keeping this workforce with you at all times. So again, a community setting, we believe that it is perfect for this.
And in terms of building that kind of community environment, how are you ensuring, when you're working in the various kind of situations you have in the past, how do we keep the atmosphere welcoming for both maybe new or diverse members? Because obviously quite often communities look very much like each other. How can we put things in place where it feels welcoming for anyone who's joining in?
So it's actually great that the community as a structure is a structure of safety, is a structure of sincerity. So people join communities, because they believe that they're going to be seeing this, they're going to be coming into a big container, a big place, let's say, that we as community professionals have designed for them. So there are many things that, of course, we try and test in communities. I, as a professional, do, and of course, there's a lot of inspiration that I try to take. And one of them was an older blog post of our resident, let's say, North Star expert in the UK, Richard Millington. So he, at the time, put together a content where he was actually trying to list the different ways to engage with different, let's say, personas in a community. So I think being able to get people to feel welcome, not only through a sincere welcoming message and an environment and set of rules and everything else, but also just giving them the opportunity right from the outset that they're not expected to do a massive amount of engagement straight away, because that could be a bit pushy for a lot of people. But also just giving them different options to make engagement is key. And I think this is what Richard was saying on that particular piece. So imagine a situation that if you really want to contribute, if you want to be one of the super contributors of communities, which we always welcome, but not everybody wants to do, then you just provide them with the options of just being able to create pieces, start threads, start questions, reply, just basically be able to be as active as you like. But I think the big percentage of people in a community are they're not the super connectors. They're the sort of people who are in the industry, they're referred as lurkers. They're the people who just wish to stay silent. They're just pretty much reading everything, spending some time in the community, but they seem not to be interacting. And sometimes this is a bit stressful for community managers, because they just want everyone to sort of contribute and sort of get into get into do some community action, engage with other people. But being able to give them the opportunity, for example, to, let's say, to react to a content, like even just, put some emojis, some like it, and reshare it.
Mm.
And, also, just, being able to vote, for example, in polls and other things. So just giving these different opportunities for people to engage in different ways. I think it's quite welcoming in that regard. So, because a lot of people, every single person that joins a community will have a different thought, will have a different, thing in mind when it comes to engagement and strategy. So, therefore, it's important for the community manager to know the different personas, to speak to as many people as they can, to get to know people. That I think is an important thing that can be done. And of course, I am not a fan of automated messages.
Okay.
I know that for large communities it's not possible to have no degree of automation, but at least for your founding members or the first few members that join in a
Mm.
community, if you welcome them personally, if you connect with them personally, and if you can afford spending one-to-one time, however small, with these people, I think it really makes it very, very different, and also makes it much worthwhile in being able to understand the different personas in the community.
It's good. It's good. When it comes to digital community, so let's park in-person events for a minute. When it comes to digital communities,
Mhm.
how much emphasis and responsibility should be weighted on the owner to ensure accessibility is where it should be? For instance, I've noticed we both wear glasses. Now I can see without my glasses, but some folk who may jump onto a webinar you're running or something may be visually impaired entirely or have different needs. Like, how can we, as community managers, ensure that we are being accessible without having to spend maybe our entire budget for a handful of people who may not even turn up? But like, how do you weigh up that balance between making sure it's accessible, but also making sure that it still actually happens? We don't kind of weigh ourselves down with that responsibility.
Well, I mean, I've had wonderful experiences, or let's say, like very telling and teaching experiences, so to speak, with people with quite, let's say, severe disabilities, so to speak. People who had severe vision impairment, and of course people who had some other issues. And as you said, we both wear glasses. That is the first thing that I'm looking for in the morning. A lot, some people. They just want to get, like, I don't know, like a cup of coffee or something. For me, when I leave my glasses somewhere, and I've also started a habit years and years ago to have a second pair of glasses with me wherever I go, because
Yeah.
if you sit on them, if you basically break them, or if you lose them, then your ability to do things is severely impaired in a way. So to be honest with you, I think in terms of the accessibility, and in terms of that sort of inclusivity, what is really important is to be open about it, and not to assume and presume things. So best people to be able to, or the best thing to talk about this and then design this, is to ask.
Yes.
I think that if you had, people who, or if you knew of people who were, let's say, who had a disability in one way or the other, and as the British say, not all the disabilities are apparent. So there are a lot of disabilities that from the outside you see that this person, you think that that person is very, very much able to do things, but they may
Yes.
have a severe disability. I, for example, years and years later in my life, I found out that I'm suffering from dyscalculia, which I didn't know,
Okay.
which is not dyslexia, but having a bit of a problem with the numbers. And I had to work all my life, to sustain a professional life, managing that. So to have a number of people around you, whether you would like to, just keep them as a, sort of loosely tied, advisory council, so that you can actually design your community or improve your community in terms of accessibility,
Yeah.
or you just see them, identify them in your community. It's important to have a channel or establish a channel where they have direct access to you or the designers of your community, so that this feedback can be collected. One big problem that I've seen is that this feedback sometimes is organized, is arranged because of as an attraction point for the community, or because of law, or because of whatever, or because of regulation, but the feedback is not acted upon. So I think what is crucial here is not just to collect the feedback or have a mechanism to collect the feedback, but to be able to action it and then provide an update that, some of the things have changed. So people, not only they want to see, let's say, an accessibility issue identified, but also they just want to see it actioned and fixed, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the asking question part there is really important, because, for instance, we both went to an event recently, and if I was running an event, and I wanted to make sure that things were, say, wheelchair accessible, rather than just guessing what I'm not in a wheelchair, so guessing what folk I need and different requirements and whether or not the venue is suitable, you're better off just asking the questions of people who are going to be using the facilities rather than just presuming. I think presuming is almost as ignorant as ignoring it, right? And I think if we can just make sure we're asking the people who may be the ones using the facilities and the tools and the things, I think that just gives them a voice. And I think it's important that we make sure, personally, that we're including them in that conversation from the start, rather than it being an afterthought. And I think that kind of leads on to my next thought, which is around when you are building out things like community guidelines and ethos and goals and stuff, how can we be sure, whether it's an in-person event or whether it's an online community, how can we be sure that these are being kind of followed? And what do we do if someone steps over the line? Actually, we don't really talk like that in this community, and that's why. Like, how do you go around that in terms of enforcing community guidelines?
So, community guidelines, let's say codes of conduct
Yeah.
also, those are never, they're a bit like, the sort of when you buy like a new piece of software, or when you just register to something, when you go next, and finish.
Yeah.
So basically, a lot of people just, don't read that kind of thing. And we made it a habit, now that we're in an online world where, there are lots of rules and regulations, due to a service or whatever. We just, made a habit of, not really noticing these sort of rules and stuff. So first of all, these are very important in a community setting, because it just sort of sets the scene and sets the expectations. I found out that in personal and professional life, that, as a society, as a general society of humans, or like a group of humans, we are still terribly bad at managing expectations. So it's just, this transcends, nations or genders or anything. There's a lot of assumption, there's a lot of presumption when we're actually establishing conversations, and the same goes for community as well. So the codes of conduct and the community rules, or guidelines, so to speak, they are there to put that right in some way, or shape or form. Thankfully there's a lot of context around it. There's a lot of work that has already been done, and a lot of this is basically also governed by some open licenses as well. So people actively share, the guidelines that they've created, that they've improved, so that they can be an inspiration for other community builders. So if you're struggling with your guidelines, just look at the guidelines of communities around you. Many of them are based on guidelines created by some other communities, which they were able to bring on thanks to an open license. And I also encourage you to do the same as a community builder if you're bringing in, guidelines that you've actually bettered through experience in your community. Anyway, I would say one of the best ones, if I'm not mistaken, it must be Stack Overflows. Because it actually outlines the processes and examples as well. So the problem with internet forums, as general, not talking about that particular platform, is that there's been a lot of really tough conversations. Some people asking sort of simpler questions and they get a bit of a backlash and everything, which is also apparent in some communities as well. So what I do remember Stack Overflow doing is that they just put together some examples of things that are not acceptable.
Okay.
And also what they've done is that they've been extremely clear on what will happen afterwards. So outlining something, saying like, this is not acceptable, this is not, what we expect in the community, is one thing. But what also members don't want to do is that, just these being enforced at will. These being enforced with, with some, let's say, with some generic sort of attitude, just people just executing some administrative powers without actually just connecting them to anything that was previously communicated to members. So I think this is important to put together. So if you just say that, so if there's a violation, if there is something that we don't see, this is what's going to happen in the first place. This is what's going to happen if you do it for a second time, and it will lead to this, and that. So if you have these, and if you can clearly communicate about this sequence, about these actions, about this sort of scene arrangement that you're setting in your community when somebody joins in, and get their express consent that they're going to be voluntarily, abiding by these rules, by existing, by accepting, I think it's a wonderful start.
Yeah, I when you were chatting about that, I opened Stack Overflows, and they've got a section called unacceptable behavior, and it lists out things that they quite clearly do not allow, and it goes into quite detail on, say, for instance, misleading information. There's then a whole page on what counts as misleading information, and it goes through, and then it goes through their reporting policy. And I think it's so black and white. And I think a code of conduct, it's one of those things that I think often starts quite fluffy, being like, please be kind, we're here to do this, we're here to be generous. But I think in terms of breaking it down to black and white, it's really important. And I think when it comes to enforcing your code of conduct on someone who may be stepping over the line, or what you feel like is actually quite toxic for your community, ultimately no one's forcing that person to be there. And it is, if you're the one running it, sometimes you have to make those tricky decisions and be like, maybe this isn't the space for you. But I think when it's black and white, it makes it so much easier, doesn't it, for everyone to know where the line is, and what is and what not allowed. And it just brings clarity to the situation, doesn't it?
It's true, but also, you see, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, just like many things in human interactions. It's basically what happens is that we don't want to suffocate people into, into this. So, for example, there's some communities where instead of rule, they just enforce things like this is against the rules and regulations and everything. Ultimately, you have to act in an understanding or in expectation that people join a community because they want to be there, and they want to get into that community so that it actually can do some good for them, and also they can just give back to that community to do good for others. It is the basis of a community. So in a majority of cases, maybe it's not that black and white. I guess, for Stack Overflow or, anything that is of that magnitude in terms of the questions and answers and everything, those rules have probably been written with, blood, sweat and tears. So there's been a lot of foundations, and so there's been a lot of, people, there's a lot of things happened possibly. So what you ultimately want to do is that, to hit that sweet balance where these rules can actually be, completely adopted by the community members. So you don't actually want the community team to be policing the place 24/7 or an AI bot,
Sure.
just, scouring through all these conversations and trying to find something because they're hopeless about it. It's still in 2024. But you want the community members to be able to, let's say, own the community. I think that is the idea of a perfect community in some ways, and be able to, ask people to, behave in a certain way because this is, what they're expecting from the community. So that's why also just designing these rules or constricting these rules in such a way that, you're only able to interact in such a way is a bit of an overkill. But if you create a
Yeah.
detailed set or let's say a very, very clear picture together with the members, I
Yeah.
think then you're heading into the right direction.
I think you're right. And that culture thing there is really important. I play football on a Monday night with a group of gents who have played on the same pitch for the same time for the last 20 years. And there's a culture, we play proper football for 90 minutes, hard tackles, call your own fouls, like real competitive football. But what we don't have is we don't have aggression and we don't really have swearing. And when someone new joins, they quite quickly learn, actually, we don't swear at each other. So it's not something we do. It's just not something, doesn't feel good. No one wants to, spend 90 minutes in the rain on a cold Monday night to then be told, something not very kind. And it's just a culture thing. Like, no one needs to be told it. It's what happens. And if someone does potentially come in and they're a little bit sweary, then someone just has a quiet word with them. Look, it's not something we really do here. Do you want to just tone that down a little bit? And it kind of self-manages itself. But that's because there's culture there that's built over the last 20 years. And it's just, no one needs to sign something. It's very clear. But that's what you want as a community manager. That's the dream, isn't it? It's so much easier when you're trying to enforce, like, quote unquote rules, and rather as like mum and dad community manager being like, please don't do that, please don't do that, actually your peers around you are like, that's not really what we do here. It's so much more impactful.
It's very much true. And also, it's one of the things is that the rules alone don't make a community. It's also there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of components that actually just complete a community from one end to the other, I believe. So I think it was David Spinks who did say at sometimes the communities is also about or community culture in a way, just referring to what you just said, is also about who you don't let in. So it's also about just who you want to for your community to have. I'm not saying just in an elite way or whatever, but it's also about community intentionality. This is something that I've been talking about for a number of months and years now, and I believe that if the community's intention, if the community's direction is well set, and everything is designed around that particular intention, that particular direction, then just everything, the admission criteria, the conversations that take place in a community, and also the rules and regulations, so to speak, and the expectations from people, they do follow as well. So I do remember, well, now it's been a little while now, on one of the summits, I did start about, the movie Fight Club. That was, I found out years and years later. I mean, this is an old movie and I'm old enough to have seen it in the cinema in the first time. A lot of people listening to these sorts of podcasts weren't even born yet, which actually makes me, just, horrifyingly old in that regard. But I remember having seen it, and after starting a community career years and years later, I rewatched it, and I figured out that the whole movie was about community. And of course, the rule, the number one rule is not to talk about the Fight Club. So people are there. You just go in and you fight. Of course, we don't condone violence. We don't want you to fight, but we want you to make sure that, when people comes in a community, they know what it's about in clearest terms.
I've not seen it. I want to see it now. I've heard obviously a lot about
Well, I think it is a wonderful movie. I mean, having seen it with a different set of eyes, it really, makes it, very, 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 very different. And I think that, you should definitely have a podcast episodes about, films about community, maybe with someone from the industry.
That would be a fun podcast. There we go. That's season 4. Thanks for the idea. That's perfect. Before we wrap up, I am keen to get what your thoughts are on what's coming up, what's bubbling in community world, especially digital community world. Like what do you feel is yeah, what's bubbling up? What's coming up next?
So I'm going to start walking on a fence here because I really don't want it to be a bit of a, let's say, sort of a self-promotion, but it is something that a lot of people can actually work on. So one of the recent conversations that I had, the recent appearances that I've had, it was about ecosystem building. One of the reasons why I've deliberately moved to Cambridge is because there's a massive technology ecosystem here.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to connect ecosystem building and startup communities and technology clusters, so to speak, with community building, and it does make a very good connection. So, well, talent-led, because we talked about it, or talent communities, so to speak, it just forms one of the various legs. But it could be that we're talking about social communities like local, hyper-local communities of entrepreneurs, remote workers, people who deal with, let's say, government institutions when you're building clusters and ecosystems. I think that this is quite an important thing because we can see a lot of efforts around the world, around the UK and around the world in building, let's say, artificial clusters, artificial ecosystems. This place, Cambridge, very famously being called Silicon Fen, so to speak, because they just want to make it the Silicon Valley of Europe, and they've largely succeeded in that regard. But it's not the only one. There's a lot of work going on in European Union, in some other parts of the world outside the US, where, of course, this has been going on for some time. So what I'm saying is that community building, I found out that it has actually, created a great avenue to give meaning to these efforts and also to accelerate them. So I think that this is what is coming. And of course, this goes hand in hand with the newer ways of working, like remote work. Again, going back to my old age, I did my master's thesis in 2001. I graduated from university in 2000. I say that, in many recordings, but when I say to people, I graduated from university in 2000, people ask me 2000 and what? They cannot read. There's been a
Just
year
2000.
that was called 2000. Anyway, in 2001, I did the thesis, and it was by pure coincidence, it was about remote work. Everybody laughed then, they're not laughing as much now. So remote work communities or experience communities or community building that is connected to, let's say, distributed work, remote work, hybrid work experiences is an important thing, I believe. And I think that if you connect it to something greater or something that is pushed in a number of agendas, like ecosystem building or like culture building in organizations, in individual organizations or global organizations, those are, I think, important avenues, important niches where community builders can actually concentrate on in these days. And there I've said it.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, we unpacked quite a lot today. I felt like it was a whistle-stop tour on around guidelines and welcoming and the future. And if people want to chat to you more, where's the best place to catch you? Is it LinkedIn the best place to find you? Is that where you're most active?
Well, LinkedIn is where I'm most active. I'm not a as a Generation Xer, we generally struggle. Generalization is never a good thing, but we generally struggle with social media and sharing a lot of things on social media. But I think LinkedIn came to our rescue, so that's where I am most active. Because that's all about professional things. Because I'm at a loss to talk about personal experiences. I've started to talk a little bit more about that in a more of let's say interesting project settings on LinkedIn. So that's where they can find me. My website is ilkerakansel.com. And that's where I have a number of contacts opportunities as well, and that's where I also put. I usually list the events, the recordings, and hopefully one of these days the podcasts that I've partaken. And this has become a really, really cool jewel in on that connection. So thank you very much, Pete, for that.
Thank you so much for joining me, and for everybody else listening. I hope you take the time to subscribe so you make sure you catch the next one, and we'll see you next week.
We are Steadfast Collective. We exist to craft digital applications that bring people together. A team of smart creatives, we are excited by technology and we always aim to leave the internet in a better place than we found it. Working with many of the UK's leading communities, we use technology as an accelerator to help them grow and engage their members. Our applications resource membership organisations, grow businesses, and create value. We know what it takes to ship, market, and scale applications, and we apply this wealth of background knowledge to everything we do. We're not just another agency, we are community builders.